I stood in Daniel's kitchen, my hands shaking as I folded his laundry. The words he had just spoken hung in the air like poison. "You're worthless, Mom. Just a worthless burden taking up space in my house." 24 years of sacrificing everything for this man who was supposed to be my son, and this was how he repaid me. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I had given up my dreams of opening a small bakery to pay for his medical school applications. I had moved in with him 6 months ago when my landlord sold my apartment building, thinking it would be temporary. But Daniel saw it differently. To him, I was just another mouth to feed, another problem to deal with. The disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than any knife ever could. I had raised him alone after his father walked out when Daniel was 3. Every birthday, every Christmas, every school event, it was just me and him against the world. Or so I thought. Now I realized I had been fooling myself. The little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms was gone. In his place stood a man who saw me as nothing more than dead weight. "Pack your things and get out," Daniel said, not even looking at me as he grabbed his coffee mug. "I want you gone by tonight." The words felt like a slap across my face. I had been living with him for 6 months, cooking his meals, doing his laundry, cleaning his apartment while he worked at the hospital. I thought I was helping him save money and build his career. Instead, I was apparently ruining his life. My hands trembled as I reached for the laundry basket. "Daniel, please.
We can talk about this."
"I know I've been. There's nothing to talk about," he cut me off. "I'm tired of supporting you. I'm tired of you being here when I bring friends over. I'm tired of explaining why my mother lives with me like some kind of charity case." Charity case. That's what I had become to my own son. The woman who had worked herself to the bone to give him every opportunity was now just a charity case in his eyes. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to stay steady. If that's how he felt, then so be it. But he had no idea what he was really throwing away. I packed my belongings in silence while Daniel got ready for work. 3 suitcases and 2 boxes. That's all I had to show for 20 years in the same apartment. Daniel walked past my room without saying a word, grabbing his keys from the kitchen counter. "Lock up when you leave," he called out, and then he was gone. The apartment fell silent except for the sound of my own breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed I had been sleeping in for 6 months and let the reality wash over me. My own son had thrown me out like trash. But as I sat there, something else started to take hold. Daniel had no idea what I was really capable of. He didn't know that I owned this apartment building. When I sold my old place, I had used the money as a down payment on this entire complex. Daniel had been so impressed with himself for finding such a great deal on rent. He thought his landlord was just some generous property management company. The rent he was paying barely covered the maintenance costs, but I had been happy to subsidize it because I thought I was helping my son get established in his career. I made my decision right there in that bedroom. If Daniel wanted to treat me like a burden, then he could learn what it really meant to carry one. I pulled out my phone and called my property manager, Janet. "I need you to list the apartment in Unit 3B at market rate," I told her. "The current tenant's lease expires next month, and I won't be renewing at the current terms." Janet was surprised. "But Mrs. Morrison, that's a huge increase. The tenant will have to pay nearly double what he's paying now." "Are you sure?" I was sure. For the first time in months, I was absolutely certain about something. Daniel wanted his independence so badly. Well, now he could have it at full price. I finished packing and loaded my car. As I drove away from the building that I owned, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt powerful. Daniel thought he was getting rid of his burden, but he had no idea that his comfortable life was about to become much more expensive. The next chapter of my story was going to be written on my terms, not his. I had been smart with money my whole life, something Daniel never knew. While other single mothers struggled to make ends meet, I had invested every spare dollar. The life insurance money from his father, my savings from working double shifts, the money I made selling my grandmother's jewelry, it had all gone into real estate. I now owned 3 apartment buildings and had a comfortable nest egg that most people would retire on. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment across town within 2 days. It was in a luxury building with a doorman, a fitness center, and a view of the river. The monthly rent was more than Daniel paid for his entire apartment, but I could afford it easily. As I signed the lease, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. This place was mine, completely mine. No one could call me worthless here. No one could throw me out of here. I arranged for movers to bring the furniture I had in storage, pieces that Daniel had never seen because they wouldn't fit in his cramped apartment. My new home was going to be everything I had dreamed of, but never allowed myself to have because I was too busy sacrificing for someone else. 3 weeks after I moved out, my phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Mom? His voice sounded different.
Smaller.
Daniel. I kept my tone neutral. Look, I got a notice from my landlord. They're saying my rent is going up to $2,800 next month. There must be some mistake. Can you help me figure this out? I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I took a sip of my morning coffee and looked out at the river view from my new kitchen. I'm sure there's no mistake, Daniel. Rents go up. That's how the world works. But this is nearly double what I'm paying now. I can't afford this on my salary. Mom, I might need to move back home with you until I figure something out. Move back home. With me. After calling me worthless and throwing me out, the audacity was breathtaking. I don't have a home for you to move back to, Daniel. You made that very clear 3 weeks ago. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Mom, please. I'm sorry about what I said. I was stressed and I took it out on you. But this is serious. I need help. You need help. I repeated slowly. That's interesting, Daniel. 3 weeks ago, you told me I was worthless. You said I was a burden. You threw me out of your apartment like I was garbage. And now you need help. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. I made a mistake, okay? I was wrong. But that doesn't change the fact that I can't pay $2,800 a month for rent. I'm a first-year resident. You know what they pay us. I knew exactly what they paid him. I also knew what he spent his money on. The expensive dinners, the designer clothes, the new car he had bought just before telling me I was too expensive to have around. Have you tried budgeting? I asked. Maybe cutting back on some of your expenses? This isn't a joke, Mom. I'm going to be homeless if I can't figure this out. Homeless. The same thing he had made me when he threw me out without caring where I would go or how I would manage. I'm sure you'll figure something out, Daniel.
You're a smart man.
You went to medical school after all. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let him stew in his own choices for a while. Over the next few days, I heard through mutual friends that Daniel was scrambling to find a new place. His colleague, Marcus, called me to see if I knew what was going on. Daniel seems really stressed lately, he said. He's been asking everyone at the hospital if they know of any cheap apartments for rent. Did something happen? I chose my words carefully. Daniel and I had a disagreement about our living situation. He decided he needed his independence, so I found my own place. Marcus sounded confused. But I thought you were staying with him to help with expenses? That's what he always said. That's what he always said. Of course. Daniel had been telling people that I was the one benefiting from our arrangement, that I was the one who needed his help. The reality was exactly the opposite, but he couldn't admit that to his colleagues. His pride wouldn't let him acknowledge that his mother had been subsidizing his lifestyle. I let Marcus believe whatever Daniel had told him. The truth would come out soon enough. Daniel was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between independence and being supported. 2 months later, Daniel called again. This time, he sounded desperate. Mom, I found a place, but it's a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, and it still costs $1,900 a month. I can barely make rent, and I haven't bought groceries in 2 weeks. I've been eating hospital cafeteria food because it's free. I was sitting in my living room, reading a book by the window. My refrigerator was stocked with everything I wanted to eat. My bills were paid months in advance. I had just returned from a weekend trip to the mountains, something I had never been able to afford when I was supporting Daniel. Have you considered getting a roommate? I suggested. In a studio apartment? Mom, please. I know I messed up, but I can't live like this. Can you loan me some money? Just until I finish my residency and start making real doctor money. A loan. He wanted me to loan him money after calling me worthless. After throwing me out. After years of taking my sacrifices for granted. I don't think that would be wise, Daniel. You made it clear that you don't want me involved in your life. I'm just respecting your wishes. The calls became more frequent. Daniel would phone me every few days with a new crisis. His car broke down, and he couldn't afford to fix it. He got sick and had to take time off work without pay. His credit card bills were piling up because he had been using them to pay rent. Each time, he asked for help. Each time, I declined. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest about our relationship. For 24 years, I had been the one to solve Daniel's problems. I had been the safety net, the backup plan, the person who would always be there to catch him when he fell. But safety nets only work when there's mutual respect. When Daniel called me worthless and threw me out, he had cut that net. Now he was learning what it felt like to fall without it. I went about building my new life. I joined a book club at the local library. I started taking painting classes. I made friends with my neighbors in the luxury building. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself instead of constantly worrying about someone else's needs and problems. For months after moving out, I stopped answering Daniel's calls altogether. He had left dozens of voicemails, each one more panicked than the last. He talked about being evicted, about sleeping in his car, about borrowing money from loan sharks. But in all of those messages, not once did he acknowledge how badly he had treated me. Not once did he apologize for calling me worthless. Every message was about his problems and how I could solve them for him. It was the same pattern that had defined our relationship for years, except now I wasn't playing my part anymore. I had learned something important in those months of silence. I had learned that I was not responsible for Daniel's poor choices. I was not obligated to rescue him from consequences that he had brought upon himself. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was not determined by how useful I was to other people. I was valuable because I existed, because I had dreams and feelings and a right to happiness. Daniel had tried to convince me otherwise, but he had been wrong. Through Marcus, I learned that Daniel had indeed been evicted from his studio apartment. He was couch surfing with various friends and colleagues, wearing out his welcome one sofa at a time. His pride had kept him from admitting to anyone that his own mother wouldn't help him, so he made up stories about family problems and temporary setbacks. But people weren't stupid. They could see that Daniel was struggling, and they started to distance themselves from him. No one wants to be friends with someone who might ask to borrow money or crash on their couch indefinitely. I felt no satisfaction in hearing about his struggles. But I didn't feel guilt either. Daniel was a grown man with a medical degree. If he couldn't figure out how to manage his finances and treat people with respect, that was his problem to solve. I had spent enough years trying to fix his problems for him. Those days were over. I had my own life to live now, and I was finally learning how to enjoy it. 6 months after I moved out, Daniel showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see him. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me again. When he walked into my apartment, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept well in weeks. But what struck me most was the expression on his face. The arrogance was gone. The sense of entitlement that had always marked his interactions with me had disappeared. In its place was something that looked like humility. "This place is beautiful, Mom," he said quietly, looking around at my furnished apartment. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I didn't offer him a seat. I didn't offer him anything to drink. I just stood there and waited for him to say whatever he had come to say. "I know I hurt you," he began. "I know I said terrible things and treated you badly. I was wrong." It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered. "I've been thinking about everything over these past 6 months," Daniel continued. "About how hard you worked when I was growing up. About all the things you gave up for me. I never appreciated it before." I listened without responding. This was his moment to talk. Mine would come later. I was so focused on proving that I was independent and successful that I forgot how I got to where I am. I forgot that you were the one who made all of it possible. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. I called you worthless, but the truth is, I'm the one who's worthless. I'm the one who threw away the most important relationship in my life because I was too proud to admit that I still needed my mother. His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and bad dreams. But that little boy was gone. The man standing in my living room had chosen to hurt me in ways that couldn't be easily forgiven. Why are you telling me this now, Daniel? I asked. Because I finally understand what I lost, he said. It's not just the money, though I know now that you were helping me more than I realized. It's everything else. The way you always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. The way you celebrated my successes like they were your own. The way you were always there when I needed someone to talk to. He was right about all of that. I had been his biggest supporter, his most reliable cheerleader, his constant source of unconditional love. And he had thrown it all away because he found it embarrassing. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what an incredible mother you were and what an ungrateful son I've been. For the first time in our conversation, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something softer than the anger I had been carrying. Daniel was finally seeing me as a person instead of just a burden or a solution to his problems. It was 6 months too late, but it was something. I need to know something, I said. When you called me worthless and threw me out, where did you think I would go? Daniel's face flushed with shame. I didn't think about it. I was so angry and frustrated with my own life that I just wanted someone to blame. I wanted someone to go away so I could pretend my problems would go away too. But where did you think I would go, Daniel? I lived in that apartment for 20 years before moving in with you. Did you think I had some secret backup plan? He shook his head. I didn't think about it at all. I was completely selfish. I only cared about what I wanted in that moment. At least he was being honest. That was more than he had given me in years. Do you want to know where I went that night? I asked. I sat in my car in a parking lot for 3 hours, trying to figure out what to do. I called 5 different hotels before I found one that had a room available. I cried myself to sleep that night, wondering how the little boy I raised had turned into someone who could be so cruel to his own mother. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so incredibly sorry. Sorry doesn't fix everything, Daniel. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together the way they were. I walked over to the window and looked out at the river. But I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I was for a while. I was furious and hurt and disappointed. But staying angry was exhausting, and it wasn't helping me build the life I wanted. I turned back to face him. I've learned something important these past 6 months. I learned that I'm not responsible for your happiness or your success. I'm not responsible for solving your problems or fixing your mistakes. The only person I'm responsible for is myself. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. And I want you to know that I'm trying to figure things out on my own now. I got a second job working nights at a clinic. I'm sharing an apartment with 2 other residents. It's not easy, but I'm learning to manage without expecting someone else to rescue me. That conversation was a turning point, but it wasn't a magical fix. Daniel and I didn't immediately go back to having a normal mother-son relationship. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But we started talking on the phone once a week. Short conversations where he would tell me about his work and I would tell him about my painting classes or my book club. Slowly, carefully, we began to get to know each other as adults instead of as mother and needy child. Daniel never asked me for money again. When his car finally died completely, he took the bus to work instead of calling me for a loan. When he got the flu and missed a week of work, he borrowed money from his bank instead of expecting me to cover his rent. He was learning to be truly independent, not just independent from me while still expecting me to be his safety net. I was proud of him for that, even though I didn't tell him so right away. Some lessons are more valuable when people have to learn them the hard way. A year after our confrontation, Daniel called with news. I got accepted into a cardiology fellowship, he said, his voice bright with excitement. It's at a hospital across the country, but it's exactly what I wanted to specialize in. I felt a genuine surge of happiness for him. That's wonderful, Daniel. You worked hard for this.
I did, he said.
And I couldn't have done it without everything you taught me growing up, even when I was too stupid and selfish to appreciate it. We talked for an hour that night, longer than we had talked in years. He told me about his plans for the future, his dreams of becoming the kind of doctor who really makes a difference in people's lives. I told him about the small business I was thinking of starting, a catering company that specialized in comfort food. It was a smaller version of the bakery dream I had given up all those years ago, but it felt right for this stage of my life. I hope I can come visit you sometime, Daniel said before we hung up. I'd like to see your new place properly. Maybe you could cook for me like you used to. Maybe, I said. But this time it would be because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated to. Daniel moved across the country for his fellowship, and our relationship continued to evolve. He sent me pictures of his new apartment, a modest one-bedroom place that he was furnishing slowly with pieces he bought secondhand. He was clearly proud of making it on his own, and I was proud of him too. He started sending me cards on holidays and calling me just to check in, not because he needed anything from me. For my birthday, he sent me a beautiful set of professional-grade mixing bowls for my catering business. The card that came with them said, "For all the meals you made with love, and for all the dreams you put on hold for me. It's time for your dreams now." I cried when I read it. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of recognition. My son was finally seeing me as a whole person, not just as his mother. He was finally understanding that I had my own hopes and ambitions and desires. It had taken him 25 years and a very painful lesson to get there, but he had arrived. 2 years after Daniel moved away, he came back to visit. I picked him up at the airport, and the first thing he said was, "You look happy, Mom." Really happy. I was happy. My catering business was doing well. I had a steady group of clients who appreciated my cooking and paid me well for it. I had friends who valued my company for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I had a beautiful home that was entirely my own. Most importantly, I had learned to value myself. Daniel and I spent the weekend together, and it was different from any time we had spent together before. We were both adults now, talking to each other as equals. He told me about his work, about the patients whose lives he was helping to save. I told him about my business, about the satisfaction I got from feeding people and seeing their faces light up when they tasted something I had made. We laughed together. We disagreed about politics and movies and music, but we disagreed respectfully. We were finally learning how to be family to each other in a healthy way. On his last day in town, Daniel asked if we could drive past his old apartment building. "I want to see the place where I learned the hardest lesson of my life," he said. We sat in my car, looking up at the windows of Unit 3B. Someone else lived there now, paying market-rate rent like everyone else in the building. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Making me pay full price for the apartment?" I thought about his question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. You needed to learn that actions have consequences. You needed to understand that treating people badly doesn't happen in a vacuum. If I had just absorbed your cruelty and continued to subsidize your life, what would you have learned from that?" He nodded. "I would have learned that I could get away with it. I would have learned that no matter how badly I treated you, you would always be there to clean up my messes." Exactly. The hardest thing about being a parent, I continued, is knowing when to stop rescuing your child and start letting them face the results of their choices. "I understand that now," Daniel said. "I understand that you weren't being mean when you refused to help me. You were being wise." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in our own thoughts. Then Daniel turned to me with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." I braced myself, not sure what was coming. "Do you forgive me? Really and truly forgive me for what I said to you and how I treated you?" I looked at my son, this man who had hurt me so deeply but who had worked so hard to understand his mistakes and make different choices. "Yes," I said. "I forgive you, Daniel. But more importantly, I think you've forgiven yourself, and that's what really matters." His eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude.
Thank you, Mom. For everything.
For raising me, for loving me, for teaching me this lesson, even when it hurt both of us. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. Before Daniel left to go back to his fellowship, he handed me an envelope. Don't open this until after I'm gone, he said. Promise me. I promised, though I was curious about what it might contain. After I dropped him off at the airport and watched his plane disappear into the clouds, I sat in my car and opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter written in Daniel's careful handwriting. Mom, the letter began, this money represents everything I can calculate that you spent on me over the years that I never properly acknowledged. Your rent payments, your sacrifices, your dreams deferred. I know it doesn't come close to covering the full cost of your love and support, but it's a start. Please use it for your business, or for a vacation, or for whatever makes you happy. Use it for yourself, because that's something you never learned how to do until I forced you to. I love you more than I ever knew how to say. Your grateful son, Daniel. I sat in that airport parking lot and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. 5 years have passed since the day Daniel called me worthless and threw me out of his apartment. As I write this, I'm sitting in the kitchen of the restaurant I opened with his gift and my own savings. Maria's Kitchen serves the kind of comfort food that reminds people of home, of being cared for, of being valued. Daniel flies back to visit me every few months now. When he comes, he doesn't stay with me. He gets his own hotel room because he says he's learned the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships. But we spend hours together, cooking in my restaurant kitchen, talking about our lives, enjoying each other's company as adults who choose to be in each other's lives rather than people who are stuck together by obligation. Sometimes I think about that terrible day when he broke my heart with his words. I think about how lost and worthless I felt, how close I came to believing that maybe he was right about me. But I also think about how that day became the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I learned to value myself, to set boundaries, to pursue my own dreams. Daniel learned his lesson the hard way, but sometimes that's the only way lessons stick. And I learned mine too, that love without respect isn't really love at all, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. We both learned that respect is earned, not demanded, and that it's never too late to start earning it.